Okay, we're back for this episode of Perspective on Athletics. And today we have with us Torre Chisholm. And Torre is the Director of Athletics at Portland State University. Torre, really appreciate you taking time and visiting with us today.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity and thanks for thinking of me.
Absolutely. Well, you've been up at Portland State about 7 years now, I think, and you're in the AD's role. And we're going to talk about Portland State a little bit more and learn a little bit more about some of the opportunities and maybe some of the challenges that go along with being the athletic director up there. But for people that may not know that much about you, why don't you give us a brief sketch of your professional career path and how you ended up at Portland State?
Well, it all started at my alma mater. I went to UC Santa Barbara and actually became involved with, of all things, a women's volleyball team because I'd grown up playing volleyball. Both my parents were volleyball coaches, and actually I took a really challenging class, the type they have at UCSB, called Technical Analysis of Volleyball. And actually, the women's coach was doing the class, and she really liked a lot of the stuff that I did or talked about and asked me to be a student volunteer my last year of college. And really, that's kind of how it all launched there. I ended up doing mostly administrative work, fundraising, still had a chance to be on the court and help out that way. And then from there, the athletic director offered me a job in the ticket office, and then that became marketing and promotions, became fundraising. And in total, I was worked at Santa Barbara for 10 years. Then I had a chance to go to UC Irvine in an associate athletic director role. Went there, was there for 7 years, and I mean, great 7 years. Started baseball, really just went to the College World Series. I mean, from scratch. Started it from scratch to doing that was spectacular. Building up soccer and volleyball and a lot of different things like that. And then in 2007. I had a chance to come to Portland State and be an athletic director, and it was really actually my first major foray out of California, but to have been here ever since.
Yeah. Well,
So that's me in a nutshell.
that is a nutshell, and that's a great sketch and talks about all your stops along the way. And so the move to Portland State, your first stint as an athletic director, and you're now 7 years into the job. And I think that, like most people, you were on the path. You probably aspired to be an athletic director at some point, and Portland State was your shot. And I'm curious, reflecting now over the last 7 years that you've been in the chair, is it everything that you thought it would be in terms of the job of athletic director? And is there anything that has surprised you or that was unanticipated?
Well, I don't think people tell you along the way, but I don't think you ever really anticipate exactly what it is. And actually, I'll tell you the analogy I use quite a bit, or maybe the example, not analogy, is right now the trend has been to hire athletic directors who come out of the revenue generation side, over marketing, be able to sell tickets, promote, raise money, all those sort of things, because every school thinks they need that. But then you get into a job, and the job ends up being 90% HR, campus, working with campus leadership, dealing with internal issues, budgeting, all those sort of things. So it really is kind of interesting, the way the jobs, at least at the levels I've been at, but they have a skill set they think they want you to be able to do, but then there's not a lot of actual support for you to focus on that skill set. So that part certainly was a learning curve. One thing that I always felt was really fortunate for me is between Santa Barbara and Irvine, both smaller and Division I schools, especially Santa Barbara. When I was there, we had a really small core staff. So I actually had a chance to do a lot of different things. You weren't, a school like that, you're never pigeonholed into one activity. So I think what a real benefit for me here is that in this job, I've done most of the work that all my staff does at one point in my career or not. So I really have a lot of empathy for the challenges they go through, the problems, and then I also have, I think, a real ability to expect what they should be doing and the level they should be able to do it at. But in terms of the job, I think the other thing that's always continues to surprise me that's a challenge in these jobs is really how many constituents you have and how many different, whether they're groups on campus or groups external, that you have to work with who have some ability to influence your program's success. And that part still astounds me.
Yeah, it is amazing, I'm sure. You know, aside from moving up to Portland and dealing with a different climate compared to Southern California on the beach at Santa Barbara or just inland in Irvine, are there differences between the two institutions, different conferences that you're in now? They're similar in the sense that they're smaller Division One programs, but Portland State has a football program competing in the FCS subdivision. Are there differences between the previous two stops in Portland State from just an organizational or structural standpoint?
Yeah, I think, well, Santa Barbara and Irvine probably very similar. They're in the same league, same higher education body, very similar. You know, Portland State certainly a little bit different, just in terms of the mission of the school, the location, in terms of the urban. You're right. Here we have football. You know, although we have many of the same problems, you know, on the budget side, personnel issues, those sort of things. But having the football component, being in the Big Sky, you know, really being in a league in the Big Sky Conference, which is a lot less homogeneous than the Big West is. I mean, if you look at, we're spread out over most of the Western United States. And we have schools that have fun, you know, a lot of different missions, a lot of different challenges based on location. So trying to work through, you know, with your peers to work and find common ground of how you move your conference forward. Yeah, you know, so there's certainly those changes. Funding models are fundamentally different, actually. So yeah, there was definitely a learning curve in there. But at the core of it all, it's the same principles. You have the same philosophy of supporting your student athletes. You know, to be a successful athletic director, the ability, frankly, to work with other campus leadership in a collaborative method. Because I'll say, you know, one thing, the reality is, my experience at any university so far is there's not necessarily a lot of it's not the standard hierarchical system that you maybe encounter in private sector. And universities work on shared governance model. And that basically means that if you want to get something done, your president thinks it's a great idea, he's going to tell you to go work with the other people that have to agree to you to get it done. And so and being able to work in that sort of organization is vital regardless of where you are.
Right, and higher ed does move slower than the corporate world for that same reason, I think. You know.
Well, yeah, I always use the analogy when I talk to people in the external community is, you know, our job in athletics, I think sometimes is we're almost like a spoke, and we've got to figure out our spoke moves like this, the university moves like this. The AD's job is to make sure how the two mesh together so it works efficiently.
It sounds easy.
Oh, yeah, piece of cake.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts about the job and the different campuses. I want to talk a little bit more about Portland State. And one of the things that's interesting, I think, about your institution is that you are literally right downtown Portland. I mean, you are in a few city blocks, and it's high rises and a campus that has a large student population, although not what would be considered a residential campus. So you're dealing with the physical location, you're dealing with commuter students, you're dealing with things like, 2 or 3 professional franchises in the city of Portland. So I'm wondering, it's not all Big Sky campuses have to deal with that. Not all Division I campuses have to deal with that sort of thing. So as you consider your environment, I'm wondering if you just talk a little bit about what that brings, both in terms of opportunities and maybe challenges, being right in the heart of a major metropolitan city with many competing franchises.
Well, you hit it exactly. There's certainly challenges, but there also is incredible opportunity. I mean, and unfortunately, it's really easy for all of us to identify challenges more often than not. And you hit on a few of them. You know, we have a traditional commuter campus. It's grown increasingly less so. We have more residents on campus or in close proximity to campus than we've ever had before. You know, realistically, our university went through a tremendous growth spurt where the social structures of the school didn't match enrollment or the academic structures. And that's typically where I think you see a little bit of gap of connectivity with alumni. You've reached a point now where we have pretty good social structures. You know, so students come here and they have a chance to get involved and be engaged, and that's what binds them to the school. But we went through probably 2 decades where that wasn't the case. So yeah, you have that issue you're dealing with. You have so many distractions, as you said, with it. So even if it's not the professional franchises, it's the concerts, it's the the jazz festival, it's the boy you point to it, and there's every night in Portland there's something great to do. And then it's interesting here. I'll tell you what I found is really been the last major significant challenge is facilities, which isn't necessarily something I knew coming here. That being an urban school, we were really landlocked. We don't have a lot of on-campus facilities. We only play 3 sports on campus. Wow. We have basketballs and volleyball. Everything else we have to compete is off campus. And I guess I probably under-anticipated the challenge that goes in to making sure that you always have facilities that you can use, that are available for practice, that are the right quality. And then how do you advance your facilities program when ultimately you don't own any of the land? So that's probably one area that's definitely a challenge. Now, converse to that, you look at all the amazing opportunities. And frankly, the opportunities are why I came to Portland State. First of all, there's a lot of things that are distractions in Portland, but those are also the things that make Portland such a great destination. Frankly, what student athlete who wouldn't come here and see what the city has to offer? And that's that drew me here. I figured, I looked at this place and it was truly unique. We're so integrated with the downtown area. And there's a lot of downtown colleges, but they're surrounded by a big wall. Here, the city streets go right through it. And this is fairly unique anywhere west of the Mississippi. A lot of schools on the East Coast that are very similar, but not that many on the West Coast. And so if a student was interested in that really urban integrated experience, we're really about the only place to go and get it. So I knew I had to find coaches who would want that. So that's one of the big things. And frankly, Portland is probably at the end of the day our #1 recruiting advantage. It also helps now as an advantage that urban living is really grown in popularity. And that has definitely trickled down to the younger demographic. So there's a lot more students looking to live in urban settings. The other things that we have advantage, I've got 2 million people that live in Portland. If I figure out how to capture at least a small percentage of them as fans of our program, we have unlimited potential. The other thing is we've got a large campus. We have 30,000 students. We're the largest in Oregon. Now, you're right, a lot of them are commuter, but as we continue to grow their interest in the athletic program, we have a lot of students that we can bring in as fans, capture their attention, obviously capture the future alumni. And then going back to the facilities thing, it's a challenge to go, it takes time to go and find the facilities and make sure that they are what you need. It's also an advantage that, frankly, I don't necessarily have to always be worrying about too frequently a fundraising campaign because I need to do this, I need to do that. Now, we're in the midst of a very important fundraising campaign right now to build a 5,000-seat multi-purpose arena. But frankly, Portland State's never really had to invest a lot of money in facilities or effort in facilities prior to this. And that is an advantage because we have all the facilities we need. We just got to go and find them and make arrangements to use them. So, definitely the good and the bad that comes with it. I came here because I thought there was more good, and 7 years in, I think that still plays out.
Yeah. I want to go back to the student body for a minute because, as you mentioned, 30,000 students on their campus, very few residential, and maybe commuter is the right word, maybe non-traditional, maybe a number of non-traditional students. But for a campus that's trying to build its athletic program and build a fan base, it usually starts with students. And has that been particularly challenging because of maybe a relatively low number of students that live on campus? Or how have you been able to effectively reach out? I've been to games. I know that you have a pretty good student following. What was that process like? Or how do you go about that because you don't have a core, on-campus base of students that some other schools might enjoy?
It takes a lot. What we found here is it takes a lot of work directly with student groups. And that's probably true at a lot of schools. But I think here I've discovered it more. I had a lot of success at Santa Barbara and at Irvine just building student organizations that come out and their support groups and do it. And I found you build a good program and they're instantly going to respond because most of them are looking for a more traditional experience. The students of Portland State aren't necessarily looking for that traditional experience. So you have to educate them about what a great time it is, and you have to do it really working with a lot of different groups and working in very finite numbers, which takes more time. and it is definitely more labor intensive. But once again, going back to the fact that I've got 30,000 students here, so I've just got to figure out ultimately how to get a percentage of them interested and invested. The other thing that's really unique about Portland State is our average age of our students is 25. So we do have a lot of reentry and older students. So it's really interesting. I'll be watching monitoring the doors sometimes at a basketball game, and you have students coming in that they might be grandparents, but they have their valid student IDs and they're really enrolled in school. And so what that's probably ends up being the more interesting challenge is, as you know, when you work in athletics, you already deal with the challenge of marketing to really different demographics. In marketing to students is fundamentally different than how you market to the community. Well, here, not only that, I take the students and then marketing to a 19-year-old student versus a 26-year-old student is also a fundamentally different experience. So how do you break those things up more and more and have programs? And over time, we've really done a lot of things to challenge that. We've done, like a lot of schools will do, they'll do parent day, and it's your parents are supposed to come in and go to the game. Well, here, it's got to be family day here, because it could be the parents have 3 kids at home and we want them to bring them to the game. We've also had a growing international student population, so we've really focused on international student days. And actually had one of my favorite things we've ever done is we made a shirt in 40 different languages that said "Go Vikes" all in the front. So yeah, just you figure how to be creative. You figure out what your students, who they are, and what they're interested in, and you reach out to them.
Yeah. And what about the flip side now? Not the students of Portland State, but like you mentioned, Portland's got an expanded population of about 2 million potential fans for the Portland State Vikings. Yet they must be hard to reach. You've got already mentioned professional franchises in town, but beyond that, you have loyal Oregon State and University of Oregon fans, sometimes to the point they're not even alums of those institutions, but they are fans. How have you tried to carve out your niche of that non-Portland State alum population and bring them into your fan base?
Well, we do it in a couple different ways. One, it starts with just philosophical. First is accessibility. We're much more accessible. Yeah, you're right. We have a lot of fans of the 2 Pac-12 schools that live in our immediate area. But to go to one of their football games, it's a full-day commitment. To go to a basketball game on a Thursday night, are you really going to do it? And then plus the cost factor, the cost of their entertainment. So what we try to focus on is, okay, how do we make sure we're affordable? Then how do we make sure that we're accessible? And by accessible, that means that can you get an experience with us that you're not going to get someplace else? And you can get that. I mean, our current gymnasium is a prime example. At 1,500 seats, you're going to sit so close to the floor. You're never going to be that close to a Blazer game. You're probably never going to be that close if you go to a Ducks game. And then on top of that, our athletes are accessible. I mean, they're right in the lobby afterwards, where a young kid who could come up and talk to them and interact with them. And the other thing that we also look at is we also feel like that we're for young people, we try to promote that we're an obtainable goal. I mean, it's realistic for a young athlete to think someday I can work hard enough that I can earn a college scholarship. Not necessarily that realistic to think they're going to play for the Blazers. They all dream about it. But at the end of the day, we offer a viable, realistic goal that they could attain to. So that's part of it on the philosophy side. Now, in the application side, I have to be honest with you, it is really challenging. The biggest problem you run into, I feel, in an urban market is, aside from all the distractions, all the other activities, is how do you actually buy into the marketplace? Because let's say, use an example, the paper here is the Oregonian. I can go and I can try to buy, a half-page ad in the Oregonian. It's probably going to cost me $20,000 to buy it. And you know what? It's going to reach a lot of people. It's probably going to reach 1 million people. But of those 1 million people, how many of them are actually my core audience? And that's a very small percentage. But I still have to spend the big money to get there. It's the same thing in radio and TV. So for a lot of it, the challenge has always been, how do you buy in and how do you blanket a market, a big city market, on a a smaller school budget. And that's actually where the advent of social media has really started to help a lot of schools like ours. Is it does give us a better ability to directly target our audience. So it allows us to continue to communicate with the people that we already have as a core constituents. What it doesn't allow us to do is how do we reach people that are just right maybe on the fringe of our community who would likely go to an event, but we can't reach them because we can't afford to buy into the media place. Yeah. That's the subset of fans that we have to constantly figure out how do we reach.
Well, if you ever come up with a concrete solution, I think you can write a book and sell that and make a mint. Everybody's challenging.
Pretty good chance.
Yeah. So,
excuse me, Mark. I gotta take a sponsor break. There you go.
There we go. You got to keep your sponsors happy. No problem.
Yeah.
So I want to transition now. I appreciate your thoughts on that, and I know that Portland State's doing a great job on every front in terms of its marketing efforts, and your fan base is growing. But I want to transition away from Portland State for a moment. All of our guests, I always ask them their thoughts about leadership. I think leadership is a hot topic always, but particularly these days in intercollegiate athletics with so much going on. But I'm wondering, as you think about leadership, and you've been in the leadership chair now for several years, what do you think represents good leadership? What do good leaders do, and how do they act? And what are some of the things that would be recognized as effective leadership?
Well, I think y'all. It starts with honesty first and foremost. And talk with your staff. You have to make sure you never commit to something that you know you can't deliver. So that to me is always the first component. That's what I want out of the person I work for, and I'm pretty sure that's what most of the people that work for me want as well. I think leadership has to be aspirational. We live in a time where we're becoming so bogged down in data and minutia and just management that it's easy to lose sight of actual aspirational leadership. And so I think that you just can't ever get away from that. A leader has to aspire to a bigger vision for whatever their organization is. Because interestingly enough, that is a hard skill. Not everybody can do that. So I think that's it. Communication. I used to always people would tell you that if you can't figure out what you want to study in school, you should go, study English because being able to write is always going to be really important. And I used to poo-pah that, but I can't tell you how often, the ability to communicate effectively in person and in writing, plays such a major role in any sort of leadership capacity. So I think certainly that part of it. I'd say I think it really has to have a clear philosophy. Would be maybe the last component. I've had a chance. I've actually hired every head coach that we have on staff. So I've done more than my fair share of hiring. Everybody aspires to the next spot. To be in the next job, whether you're an assistant coach aspiring to be a head coach, an assistant AD aspiring to be an AD, but not everybody thinks about what it means or how they run a program or the philosophy they implement. And that's when I talk to people, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that they've really been thoughtful about that. So I think those are probably a few of the things that, well, at least off the top of my head, jump out.
Yeah, no, those are great thoughts, and it helps me transition into my next segment, which is asking you, your thoughts or advice for up-and-comers. The reality is, if you look across the country, there are literally hundreds of graduate programs in athletic administration, sport management, what have you, and there are far more graduates every year than there are actual jobs. So it's a very competitive market, and everyone's always looking for some sort of advantage or an edge or a way to better position themselves to either get that first job or advance in their career. And I'm wondering, you probably have conversations like this with students from time to time. I'm wondering what your advice is for those looking to get into the business. What do you tell those folks?
Well, there's a lot to tell them. And I'm actually kind of, I am not prototypical because actually I don't have, I only have a bachelor's degree. I didn't do advanced work. And that's really unusual today. But it just, when the time when I was going through it, I had a job. I could have left the job to go get a master's. and then I'd have to go internship someplace. It just didn't make sense. But nowadays, the reality is getting your master's is an important component of it. But you have to find a master's program, and pretty much all of them do. But it has to have an internship component. So you're going out and you're getting actual experience. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to experience and relationships. And even more important than that is when you have a chance to work someplace, you have to prove that you're indispensable. So that when an opportunity comes open in that organization, they don't think of anybody but you. And usually what that means is you're going to work 2 to 3 years, probably nowadays probably 2 years for virtually nothing. I mean, that's the example I always use. My first job was volunteer. My first year was volunteer. My second year, they gave me a giant stipend of $300 per month. I got into my third year. I was still doing that. And I was thinking to myself, I just can't keep doing this. I was out of school. I got engaged. And I was ready to jump athletics and go take. I got offered a job at Santa Barbara. I'd be the person who put together the class schedule. If you can imagine a job more boring, maybe putting together the phone book, I don't know, but it'd be similar to that. And I was so close, and at the very last minute, I just said, you know what, I got to stick this out. Within 1 month, they created a new position for marketing and promotions within the athletic department. And because of the work I'd done previously, I was the only person they didn't want anybody else for the job. And I always tell people that. I almost feel like it's a little bit of the proverbial wall, hitting the wall in a marathon. If you're going to work in collegiate athletics, you're going to be working for nothing for a while. You're going to hit a point where you just say, I don't think I can go any further. If you can push through that just a little bit longer, more my own and in so many other cases, that's when I see real opportunities have opened up for people. But there's a risk factor there, and not everybody's willing to take that risk.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And what about as you consider candidates? The other thing is, once you've gotten an interview or you've found a job that you want to apply for, are there things that as a hiring manager in your athletic director role that are characteristics of good candidates, or what sets somebody apart, either on paper or during an interview? What are those things that are really key traits that you either look for or find in your best candidates?
Well, and as I said, going back to something I alluded to, for me on paper, when I'm looking at it, experience stand out. And even if that experience is you just volunteered time at, meaningful time at a couple different organizations, if you're an entry-level person, but it shows a commitment to do it, a willingness to get different experiences. So in terms of paper, that's what, for me anyway, stands out. In terms of when you're meeting with someone with the interview, they have to bring energy. This is a high-energy profession. And if you can't bring energy in an interview, I can't count on you to bring energy when you're talking to my donors, talking to my ticket holders. I can't count on you to bring energy when you're working the fourth event on the weekend. And so, yeah, I think in any environment, bringing energy is really critical.
Great. Well, I appreciate your thoughts. Torre, we've come to the end of our time, but I want to wish you the best of luck. And I know that you've got a lot of great things happening at Portland State from top to bottom. Your sports are more successful. You're more visible. A lot of good things happening on the park blocks up at Portland State. But I want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule.
I appreciate you having us. I appreciate you creating a program like this to, for information for everybody who does aspire to work in the field or grow their career.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. This has been Perspective on Athletics with Torre Chisholm, Director of Athletics at Portland State University.